So in Britain today, being offensive can now mean that you wind up with a criminal record, no matter the intention. So this week, adverts for a burger van that featured pictures of Madeleine McCann have been banned for being offensive. A property developer who filmed a model of the Grenfell Tower burning on a bonfire and shared it on a private WhatsApp conversation received a suspended prison sentence. And a blogger, Allison Chables, was jailed for changing the words of a song from Oliver to allegedly mock Jewish people. Now, obviously, we don't condone these acts, but should they be illegal? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Deputy Editor of Spike, Fraser Myers. Hello. Fraser, this is really interesting to me because so often when it comes to free speech debates, often the people who are targeted have said something and it's been misinterpreted. And you have to explain to people, no, they were joking, they weren't actually being racist, that Jimmy Carr doesn't actually think it's great that lots of people died in the Holocaust. You have to do that whole explanatory thing. Yeah. In this case, we might be dealing with people who aren't very nice saying unpleasant things. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, you're right to point out that censorship in Britain has become so wild that people are getting caught out for expressing mainstream views. They're getting caught out by the law, they're being cancelled, or they're facing some other, quite unfair consequence for saying something pretty benign a lot of the time, or just having a view that is slightly unwoke. But here we have got people who have expressed offensive views, and I think it's really important to defend their right to be offensive, even if we completely couldn't disagree more with what they're saying.
So let's just go through the story. So first there's the burger van. What's happened here?
So this is a man trying to advertise his burger van in Leeds, I believe, and he used Mother's Day as an occasion to make an offensive joke about Madeleine McCann. Essentially, the joke was that burgers are so good you'll leave your kids for them and won't worry about what's the worst that could happen.
It's astonishing that...
Had a picture of Madeleine McCann. It's a very strange kind of marketing strategy.
It's very strange marketing. He would think that would work.
Yeah.
But anyway...
But he has formed this guy for doing it. Apparently he's a bit of a joker. He's done previous ad campaigns about Jimmy Savile and Fred West and that kind of thing.
So I suppose he's going for the...
character.
Well, I suppose we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's the purpose of that. So then the Grenfell Tower effigy, we'll all have read about this, but do you want to just give an update on that?
Yeah, so a man who was essentially filming a video of this effigy, a guy called Paul Bassetti, not a sympathetic character, millionaire property tycoon, seems a bit of a plonker. He obviously hangs out with some dodgy people. He wasn't him who made this Grenfell Tower effigy, but, it's his mates that put it on the bonfire. He's there filming it. Yeah. You can hear them jeering, using racist language, Yes. It's wrong to mock people's deaths, whatever their colour, but of course the effigy also features little black and brown, paper figures. And he's now received a suspended prison sentence for 10 weeks, which is quite shocking. So, he's just avoided jail time, but should he, commit another offence in that time, he could be sent to prison for essentially passing on an offensive joke.
And then finally we have the case of Allison Chables, who's done these songs online. But this is actual jail time now we're talking about.
Yeah, she's going to face jail time because she was already in the middle of a suspended sentence. So Allison Chables is a kind of singer-songwriter who does anti-Semitic parodies of songs. A very strange character. This is the second time she's been caught up in the law. Previously, she was found guilty of basically all of these cases are to do with grossly offensive messages. Yeah. So previously she said that the Holocaust was like a theme park and she put that into one of her songs. This time she changed the lyrics of I've got to pick a pocket or two to something I won't say because it's quite racist. And she pretended that she was, singing the song from the perspective of Tommy Robinson. Right. So, again, a completely bizarre, objectionable character with totally objectionable views, but we have still got to defend her right to say it.
So then what do you say to people who say, OK, those you've just outlined there, the Grenfell disaster, that's not funny and it's absolutely horrendous to pretend that it is. And, anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, these are all terrible, terrible things. So why would we not want these people in prison?
Well, you're right. These are terrible things. There's no point saying that it's funny. There's no point pretending that this stuff is going to advance our understanding of the world, that it's going to add to the debate on these issues or anything like that, which are often, many of the defences that people put forward for free speech. The reason we need to hold the line on this is because offence is subjective, and as soon as we give an inch to the government or to others who would like to prosecute people for offensive speech, then we have no leg to stand on. If we don't defend Allison Chables and Paul Bassetti, then what right do we have to say why we should have gender-critical feminists speaking their minds. Because there are people out there in the state or in society more broadly who find those views as abhorrent and offensive as something like Holocaust denial or out-and-out racism.
Yes.
These things are subjective, and that's why we don't want the government or anyone with power to be deciding what we can and can't say and what we can and can't hear.
So it's about legal precedents and the dangers of that. I mean, one of the examples that is often given is that of Count Dankula, who was the Scottish YouTuber who created a comedy video in which he taught his girlfriend's pug dog to do a Nazi salute. And then he ended up with a criminal record, £800 fine. And, I know him. He's a very nice guy, not remotely anti-Semitic, not remotely racist. But he got... So there's an example of a joke that was misinterpreted, and he gets a prosecution. But it was prosecuted under the same legislation that would see an actual anti-Semite.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the conflation of these things is too common.
Absolutely, and that's a really good example because what I actually did find the Nazi pug joke funny, and there's a lot of people who did. But when you read out that what was said in a courtroom, it suddenly is a lot less amusing when it's said dryly by a prosecutor.
Yes.
And so you kind of almost lose that defence. What we need to defend these things on the grounds of is simply that there should be no ifs or buts when it comes to free speech. An offence is not a reason to censor in any circumstances.
But a lot of people will be surprised about the Allison Chables case because Holocaust denial is illegal in many countries, but not here.
But not in Britain, and for good reason. And actually, historically, British governments have tried to keep it legal. So even when a European Union directive 10 years ago tried to ban Holocaust denial, the UK government said no. But it's still coming in through the back door, through this kind of grossly offensive, through the Communications Act route. And there are good reasons why you don't want to ban Holocaust denial.
So what are they? What are they?
I mean, obviously, as I said before, it's completely abhorrent. But someone like Deborah Lipstadt, who is famous for arguing against Holocaust denial, has made the excellent point that you do not want governments legislating on history, deciding what is correct history and incorrect history. There's also, with all of these offensive things, you need to be able to hear why they're offensive, and we need to hear these things defeated through argument in public. Because one of the things that censorship does is it just pushes problems underground, it just hides them out of view, and it might make us feel better in the short term, but it never actually defeats these arguments. In places in Europe where Holocaust denial is banned, they haven't got rid of it. There's still quite, minorities, of course, but still an unhealthily large minorities who believe in these things. And if you're not able to air those views, then those views can't be challenged and defeated either.
I mean, in the case of David Irving, for example, the historian who certainly minimised the impact of the Holocaust in his research and writing. And he went to prison for this in Austria. But when his work was torn apart by Richard Evans, another historian, that was the thing that really destroyed him. It wasn't the prison sentence. The prison sentence gave him a sheen of martyrdom and glamour in a way.
Exactly. And, people can be defeated through argument. He was totally discredited once his ideas are exposed. And that used to be our approach to how we tackled racism and misogyny and, any other kind of ism or phobia. We're losing the knack of being able to argue against these things. Instead, we're reaching for censorship. I'm worried that there's a younger generation that can't actually explain why racism is so bad or why homophobia is bad. They have no experience in tackling these things head on.
So is it just the case that people are terrified of being accused of supporting the substance of what someone says? That seems to me to be quite important here.
I think so. I think that conflation is always made. Whenever you defend the rights of someone, you defend free speech, the assumption is you must agree with them, or you must at least secretly agree with them in some way. Right. But that's because we're losing the knack for defending free speech on its own terms, recognising that free speech is not necessarily about the content. We can't really prejudge that. We need to be able to defend free speech in all circumstances so that it's clear that it's not Holocaust denial, for instance, that we're interested in.
Well, I mean, we're talking about these very serious issues, and when you watch the video of the Grenfell effigy fire, you just... I mean, it's baffling to me. I watch and I'm baffled by it. But I also know I don't know what's going on in there, that perhaps to them they found this hilarious. I mean, that's the other thing. Humour is massively subjective as well.
Humour is totally subjective, and maybe we can all agree that these men are plonkers or whatever, but when did it become a crime to be a plonker?
But what's the legislation here? Because it wasn't... It was the Communications Act.
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually the creation of the effigy. It wasn't the joke in of itself, what they say was a joke.
Yeah.
It was the fact that it was transmitted over WhatsApp, which is private anyway, isn't it?
That is so often the case with a lot of these crimes. It's the communication of it elsewhere.
Right.
So actually, you can watch this Grenfell video on YouTube if you wanted to, and it's fine and you won't get in trouble. But this guy who sent it into 2 WhatsApp groups, believing they were private, we think, at least he says, and then somehow or other it got onto YouTube and went viral, and he's got in trouble essentially for the dissemination of this video. Yeah, there's no suggestion that it was his idea to make the mural, not the mural, the effigy.
Yes.
So that's how the law kind of works.
But even if it had been his idea, I would still be nervous about someone going to prison for making an effigy or things they said.
Absolutely, because, it's not long before... I mean, we've already had Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries boasting about how her laws would have stopped Jimmy Carr from telling his, racist joke on Netflix, or what she perceived to be racist joke.
Yes.
She wasn't suggesting he should go to prison, but at the same time, it's quite clear that humour is being clamped down upon. Humour is always going to be subjective.
Yes.
Humour always needs to have an element of controversy as well. It should upset right-thinking people in a lot of senses.
And isn't this just going to get worse now with the online safety bill?
100 times worse, but I think there's going to be a lot more sort of pre-censorship. A lot of things are going to get taken down a lot more quickly. So the censorship is really, going to be out of control.
So this is because the social media organisations are being told that they will be held responsible for material that appears on their site. So aren't they just going to censor everything just to be safe?
They will. They now have an incentive, as if they didn't have enough of an incentive to censor at the moment, because they don't want people, on their back saying, you promote racism, you promote sexism. Now they're going to have a legal duty to censor, or to censor first, ask questions later, or perhaps not ask questions at all.
OK. Is a lot of this, though, just about this sort of spread of this ideology that says if people see, for instance, that video of the Grenfell fire, it will create racism, it creates racists. Or if you hear a song by Allison Chables, it creates anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
But that argument isn't... I mean, there's not much basis to that, is there?
No, there's no basis to it at all, but it's, we do live in a kind of... there is a very anti-democratic kind of mood in society that says that people are really stupid, they can't be trusted, they're probably already racist, and where they're just waiting for someone to, light the fuse before they go on a racist pogrom. There's that side of it, and it's really, so we have to really talk up people's ability to be able to watch things and judge things. And, the vast majority of people who are going to listen to a song by Allison Chables or see, the Grenfell effigy are going to probably be offended by it and think that's disgusting. That's why, incidentally, a lot of these things end up being reported to the police, because people object to them.
Yes.
So I really never understood the argument that, this is just, if we allow this stuff to spread, people will automatically agree with it.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for discussing this, because it's very concerning, and I fear that this is something that's going to get worse and worse, as we say. Thank you, Fraser Myers.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.